Okay, hi guys, I'm back with a video on, well, it's kind of going to be a series. I'm going to start going through maps, understanding the key points of the map, what you should be looking to control on that map, and what sort of compositions work well on attack and defense, and how you transition from one phase to another. Um, so I'm going to start off with the defense portion, and then I'm going to work my way onto the attack portion, giving like a step-by-step basic strat. I'm not going to go through any advanced strategies like, oh, if you do this on this part or if you push this part, I'm going to focus on this basics, and I'm going to have like at least one plan per map, per point per map, um, and then I'll focus on the attack side after. So for now, we're focusing on defense only. So to start off with, we'll just go through the map and understand the key parts. So first points, key parts: blue, server, catwalk. Now they all give their own individual thing, and they all have their own individual weaknesses. So obviously the weakness about catwalk is the fact that you're in a huge LOS. You have barely any cover, if any, depending on where you're standing, and it's really good because it has a lot of sightline. It can look over the whole entire point of first point past like here, and then after it struggles. So what's good about blue? Obviously, again, for the same thing about catwalk, is if it has more cover, you can engage from here. You can control here. If you control blue, you have more of a higher chance of holding first point, because if you let go of blue and you don't have the tools to retake it, or if you have a snipers can't really play aggressive because they're scared of blue. Uh, Obviously, dive tanks, if they jump up there and say they have a brig or a junkrat, you're just going to get knocked straight back down again. You have to think about controlling blue at all times. Now, server is a thing that I think it is not. I'm going to say this isn't a high priority, so I'm going to label it yellow. The yellow is not high priority. Now, you can let them in server, but the problem is you have to know where they're going to go, and you have to change your setup around it. So you don't want to all be like huddled up on one spot. You want to have your Widowmaker that's safe, have your tanks controlling the chokes. So say for example, if we had a Winston, our Winston could like jump up and control this door frame and communicate to the Widowmaker, oh, they're coming out this door. Um, and obviously our Widowmaker would keep an eye on this door frame, and then maybe our Diva could watch down the bottom one. And then obviously having someone watch the top of glass. Because if someone's up here, say for example you're running a Hanzo, you could sonic arrow this wall here and you could see the whole of this section. Or if you have a Zen or a Brig up on where I've just marked the X, you can also see when people walking up the stairs, so people that are on the catwalk can rotate. So yeah, those are the three key points of first point Gibraltar. Again, I'm not going into the advanced, sticking with the basics for now. The second point, what is the two? There are a few key parts of controlling on this map. So if you're running a Widow comp, you want to be controlling these chokes as much as possible. So you want to stick your tanks forward, you want to stick your second DPS forward, you want to keep your supports on top of Hangar with the Widowmaker, and obviously Mercy can fly backwards and forwards between the two. So the chokes are important. Make sure that you don't let them out for free. Make sure that they have not a free run to go to your Widowmaker. So if your Winston's starting up, say for example your Winston's starting up top left here, make sure that he's controlling this choke without dying, and try not to use his jump at all, because he needs his jump to run away if he gets high pressured. Obviously, if they go down to the low ground, he can drop, pressure them a bit, making sure that they don't have hard CC. So if they have Brig, Hansa, Brig, McCree, and Roadhog, you probably don't want to be doing that. You want to be playing really far, like on the high ground as much as possible, waiting for your DPS to be in a position to help follow up, and then you want to pressure that way. So it really depends on the team composition. So these chokes are really, really important to control if you're running a Widow comp. Hangar, the plane itself is super important to control, because if you control the plane, you control every part of the map. Because your Widowmaker is probably free, your second DPS is probably free, your supports are probably free. Now, on defense, if you lose these 3 points, and you like, it's honestly open season for you, because you can't do anything. When you're retaking against this, if they have the control of Hangar and they're already pushed the payload, so let's just say the payload is here, you have to think about the enemy team comp and where you can push out from. A lot of teams will just go default and walk up on the high ground. Now, if they have Widow, if they have control of the choke, if they have control of Hangar, why are you going up top? You're putting yourself inside of Widow LOS. Your tanks are going to have to drop eventually to contest point, and your supports are sitting ducks. Make sure that you use these parts here, the under parts, because Zen can walk around and sit here maybe and discord people on point, or Mercy can go through that side and she can beam people while the Zen is under forklift. Um, Honestly, at this point, I think it's good for your supports to kind of split if there is pressure elsewhere, uh, so that they don't like if they jump one section, they're going to get both your supports. Um, yeah, understanding where you should be pathing for the control that they have and the comp they have. If they have full dive, then yeah, you probably want to come out together. But if they're running like snipers and stuff, you probably want to try and go try and abuse the low grounds as much as possible. Obviously, using your tank cooldowns to get in safely. So third point. Now, what are the key parts about third point from a defensive point of view? It's these two bridges. If you control these two bridges, the enemy team has to walk into a crossfire every time. And it's very good. Even if they're running tank comps and you have like a Junkrat on one side and a Hanzo on another, that's insane damage. If they're running, if you're running like a Widow Hanzo comp, that's also insane. Like you could also run dive and you could dive from two different angles. Like controlling those two high grounds, the most important part, and retaking them is the most important part when you're when you're retaking from spawn. So say for example they push off the high ground and they're pushing in. One of the tanks need to just go on the high ground and clear anyone off this first bridge. If they have someone on the back here, like say for example a Widow, you probably want to go to like a high mobility comp, a high mobility hero, either like Tracer. I would say Genji, but he needs too many resources. Like get Tracer, Sombra. Could You could also do the Winston, but if he doesn't have Primal, he's probably going to be dead by the time he walks towards it. So unless you have Primal, I'd suggest just staying on the payload. But if there's anyone on this platform, tanks contest. If there's anyone on this back platform, make sure you have something to contest it, either Sombra Tracer. Something of high mobility that doesn't need any like resources. Just to distract them. You don't have to kill the person that's on that back platform, but keep them contested long enough that your team can clear the car and then come help you. If you can kill them, then sure, go ahead, but it doesn't necessarily have to result in a kill. So now that I've gone through the basic key parts of this map, I'm gonna go through like what comps I would suggest running for this map. So I have two first point compositions, and they both have their own different unique style. So let's start with the aggressive comp, which is Winston. I don't know what they've done with the icons here. They're really small. I'm sorry if you can't see them. So Winston, D.Va, Genji, Mercy is a pivot, and then Widow, Zen. Now, what does this team comp scream out? Taking space, being aggressive, being explosive, and creating space for the Widow and the Zen. If you sit there and wait for something to happen with this comp, we'll probably lose because Genji doesn't like being engaged on, and obviously Widow and Zen need as much space as possible and as much pressure as possible so that their Widowmaker isn't free shooting at you if they have one. Now, you have to think of it from an attacker's point of view at this point. When you're running the Genji and the Winston, you have to be thinking, where could their Widowmaker come from? And if I was the enemy team on attack, my Widow would also always be up on this door frame or pathing to at least get on top of this platform. The reason why is because you want to also, every time you want to try and get your Widowmaker inside server. So you have to try and stop that as much as possible and also create enough space for your Widowmaker to be able to free peek without having to worry about that Widow. So being reactive, being proactive with the Genji and the Winston is very good. And also you think about the composition that you have. If you dive in on that Widow, for example, she walks out, you dive on that Widow, and then you get the kill. Genji will have a reset to get away, so he's fine. The only person that needs saving is Winston, so you can DM him backwards, and also the Mercy can actually stay safe and also heal him on the way back. And then you just reset. Winston will probably have to drop down main, so you might need to help him a bit with that. And then he can also reset on the high ground after. But here's what you have to think about. Cannot let them... Okay, so one thing I want to change real quick is Diva's positioning. You can play down by ramp. Now, the reason why she can play by ramp is because she can get heals from Mercy, heals from Zen, and she's in LOS. So if someone does jump on her, then she's set fine. But her job is to keep an eye on the underground part. Because what is this? What did I say this team comp doesn't like being? Doesn't like being reactive. Because if they go underground and they walk up the stairs by the mini and they just dive your backline, like they run full dive and they just don't give a fuck about controlling blue, and they dive your backline, this comp will struggle to peel because you don't have the tools to do so. You have the tools to assassinate snipers and assassinate squishes. Um, so making sure that D.Va has the information about them going under, and obviously your Winston and Genji having enough pressure on the high ground so that they can see if they go through downstairs is huge. Uh, and then obviously if you lose first point, if you lose, what the, hello? Like this hitbox on this thing is nearly as bad as Overwatch hitboxes. If they push to second point, now this is where you need to make a decision. Genji is the pivot. The reason why Genji is here is because he can be swapped. Now, this is where you counterpick. Widow you should keep, because Widowmaker on second point is huge, because if you control Hanger and if you control these two chokes, let's just say the payload is here. Keep Widowmaker, because Widowmaker is huge on this first point. Like this first section here, Widowmaker is huge. If you have pressure and if you can control those two chokes, Widowmaker is huge. And Genji you can swap. So say for example they're running double flanker. Do you really want to run Genji into that? You probably want to run like a Brig. Probably want to run a McCree maybe. You probably want to run a Tracer. Genji needs too many resources on second point. That those resources need to go into the Widow and the Winston and the D.Va to control chokes. So I think you need to pick something that doesn't really need resources. As saying that, McCree does need a lot of resources, so you could also go Soldier, Sombra. Honestly, there are so many things you could pick. Just think about like what the enemy team's weaknesses are. Like if they're running double dive comp, as I said, uh, Sombra is good, Hanzo's good. Um, yeah, if they're running like double sniper, maybe you want to go double sniper too. Maybe you want to keep the Genji. Again, probably not really. He is good if he plays aggressive with the monkey and plays proactive. Again, but as soon as the payload gets past this section here, is where okay. So let's just go through the basic setup of how you would set up this second point. First off, the Widow would be on top of platform. Then Mercy can pivot between the two, so I'm just gonna stick her in the middle. Winston would control this section with Genji, and then uh, D.Va. Now, the things you can change here. Genji, you could change to Sombra. You could play like kind of reactive slash proactive. If you see someone like Sombra can push out and get information about where they're going, and then the Winston D.Va can set up accordingly, which is huge. You can also hack someone as they're walking in the door because she can't really be interrupted there, which is huge. Also, another thing you could run is Hanzo. Again, he could play by the Widow. He could play by the D.Va. He could play down here. He has a lot of escape, so he should be fine. Could also run. I would say Pharah? Pharah or Junk, you could, depending on their comp again. Like, if they're running tanks, you could run the Pharah. Because she has a lot of safety being on top of Hanger. She has Mercy. And if we control the chokes, we can actually just spam the hell out of them as they're walking through. That's another thing you could run. Junk kind of did the same thing as Pharah, except I think his ultimate's a little bit more consistent against tanks, and it's less of a risk. Or it's actually no risk at all using Tire compared to Pharah. So Junkrat you could also do. It's just thinking about the enemy team comp and about what control you can have. So let's get into the second point. Second point of second. This payload has a hitbox. It's garbage. Don't know what they did to it. So now, when you're retaking this close, do you really want a Widow? That's the question you have to ask. If they're running a Widow of their own, you need to pick something that has high mobility and that can kill the Widowmaker and stop them from controlling chokes. So, for retaking close, you could swap the Widow to a McCree. You could swap the Widowmaker into Rig. You could swap the Widowmaker into Genji, or if you already have the Genji, you can keep the Genji and then you can swap to Tracer, you could swap to Hanzo. Like Widowmaker retaking close is really difficult because she's kind of just, honestly, she's garbage. Like at retaking close, she's actually garbage. Unless your team can provide that space, which on Gibraltar second is very difficult if they already control top of hangar. So make sure my mic's. Yeah. So again, think about the comp that you're against. If they're running double flanker, you probably want to run Brig. You could run Brig McCree and play protect the McCree composition and use your tanks to control high ground. Um, Again, all about adaptation, all about seeing what composition they have and reacting off of it. And pathing is another thing. If they have snipers, you probably do not want to all go out high ground. Unless you're running full dive, then you can walk out with Diva Matrix, jump on the people that are controlling choke, and then go from there. But then your Zen is probably going to die, because you're going to be diving, your Zen's going to be alone. So he might have to path differently, or he might have to delay his push. Or he could change to Lucio, and then you can go Lucio Mercy, not have a backline, and then just make their two tanks useless, or make them force them to peel, which they don't want to do. Let's just say we're going out with I like the McCree and Brig against where is it? Where's Brig? There is against against dive. So when you're against dive, you can go out from the higher ground because you have the CC, you have the DM to walk through, and with dive, it's not really any like immediate threat unless you miss everything. Like if you miss the flashbang, if you miss the stun, if you miss Zen Orb spam or whatever, and then use the monkey and Diva to control high ground. But it's honestly as basic as it comes. I'm not going to go into what the meta is right now. I'm not going to go into like um, what currently works, what currently doesn't work, because this game, this meta right now is anything is possible. The only thing I can say that everyone is running right now is goats. But goats on this map in particular isn't very good because of how the high ground works, how the spawns work. So I wouldn't recommend running goats unless it's third point. But even then, if they control the two high grounds properly, it's very difficult. So yeah, if this was a meta video, it'd be totally different. But I do not know what the meta is currently, other than goats again, which I don't think goats is good. So we'll carry on from there. So let's go to hitbox is garbage. Let's go to third point. Now, what would I recommend running third point? Well, for starters, this is how I would set it up. Wouldn't have Brig because very, very bad. I'd have Widow and Genji. So Genji would be with the Winston, Widow would be up there, and then obviously Zen would be up there too. So how do you play this? Well, it's all about playing around LOS and playing to your strengths. So if you see, God, this is your cutoff line. This is where you should be engaging from, right here. If the Widowmaker gets a pick, you can drop down, maybe apply some pressure. But other than that, this is your cutoff line. Do not engage past this point, and you do not overextend past this point unless you're winning the fight heavily, or your Widowmaker is just completely popping off, and then you can a bit further forward. The reason why this is your cutoff line is because this is your Mercy. You have to think about your Mercy and your Zen here. So if your Mercy is dropping down to support your Winston Diva, and then you guys get dove, and your Mercy doesn't have anyone to GA to, she's dead. So if you engage past this line, you're basically putting your Mercy at risk. Um, so when you engage down there, if you're winning the fight, your main tank should be calling, "Hey, keep pushing, we're winning," and then the Mercy can commit, and then your Widowmaker can maybe like drop down and shoot, and then Diva can. I think Zen should maybe stay up on the high ground because it takes a long time for him to reset. But also, he could drop down. Again, depends. But so Diva, Monkey, and Genji will go forward. Again, thinking about your Mercy GA. Because if the Mercy commits here and then we start getting fucked on, Widow can jump back up there and then Mercy can GA. And then those three can like regroup or whatever. Um, yeah, control these points at all times and making sure that you engage correctly and don't overextend. Play around like the Widowmaker, the Mercy GA, and obviously the amount of burst that you get with these 3 heroes. So now let's think about attack. So if I was running attack, I'm just going to use the same color. Say we swap sides or something. Now I'm only going to do first point attack. The reason why is because... Okay, actually never mind, I'll do all of them. But just keep in mind that things change, heroes change, and the way the enemy team changes. I cannot predict that for you. That's something you have to kind of adapt to on your own. The first point, I would run double sniper. My Widow would be here, my Hanzo would be with the team, I would run Winston, Diva, Mercy, then. Now, I'll explain it step by step about how you would play this comp, and then we'll go from there. We'll use a Monkey as their team line, right? Let's just say they're running the Brig comp. Now, this is where you play slow. You have to create pressure, but you also have to play slow. So your Hanzo should always be with the tank line. The reason why is because you want to control this area. So you'd use Storm Arrow, you would damage boost their Hanzo, you would spam these arrows up on blue to force them backwards. Now, what does that do? It puts them inside of Widow LOS, so our Widow doesn't necessarily need to peek their Widowmaker. She can shoot the back as they're trying to fall back and get out of the Hanzo LOS, and we'd put pressure on that. As soon as that happens, our tanks control it. Push up, Mercy stays with them for now. As soon as our tanks control blue, Widow goes to server, and so should Zen. Now, this is where we play slightly slower. We should be trying to push them back as far as possible. If they drop, take control of it. Now, this is where we need to play a little bit more aggressive, because at this point our Zen and our Widow are inside of server, and they're probably going to try and react to that, or the Widowmaker is going to be solely focused on this or this. If the Widowmaker is being focused on our blue top high ground, our Widow should be free to peek, should just kill everything at this point, because we have a crossfire. So we control 2 of the areas, the 1, and this is the most high risk one to control, because can you not? These are 2 most important, not important, but this one is the least important because it doesn't have much cover, and you also put them in a position where they're controlling this side of the area. So that's how it go from there. Where I progress is obviously you could also stick. Diva should fall down now and start pushing the payload. And then you keep your Hanzo on top of blue at all times. So Winston can try and take control of glass, catwalk, control this upper choke, uh, and Hanzo should always stay on top of blue. The reason why, and Mercy can drop down here. So those 2 are pushing the payload, these 2 are controlling server, and Hanzo's on top of blue. The reason why he's always up there is because, 1, it's easy to peel for him, because if Winston jumps up, he can jump forward, and Diva can peel for him, his Mercy can heal him. Another reason why he's up there is because if they dive our Mercy can GA up and then Diva can boost away. The reason why these 2 are in server is because they have to touch the point. Further these 2 are away from the payload, while still being effective, is really good because they have to do one of 2 things. Contest our Widow or contest the point. They contest our Widow, they're not contesting point, and then we should win the fight that way. Winston's obviously up there to control them from getting free high ground. He can call if the Widowmaker is taking high ground from him, or he can call that they're all going high ground. Maybe a Widow can get a free pick. Moving on to second. So it's important that obviously you try and stagger their spawns, but most importantly is trying to get our Widowmaker on top of the choke. Then probably on the payload. Then we'll be on the payload. Damn McCree. And Mercy will be up top. Hanzo will be up top too. So this is how I would set up. Obviously, I'd try and control these chokes as much as possible. So I'd stick my Winston on top of forklift and our Diva lower forklift. The reason why is because obviously there's 2 ways to get out now. So if our tanks are controlling those high grounds, they should say, I'm controlling upper, I'm controlling forklift. Our Widow should have her eyes trained on that bottom right. If the Winston calls they're coming out top right, she changes. If they call that they're coming out bottom, she changes. If they don't call anything, then Widow should assume that they're coming down here. You could also Sonic arrow down the bottom there. So you have 3 points control. You have 3 areas controlled. And at this point, our Zen is pushing the payload. Now we wanted to get it to bridge. This is the whole goal. We want to get it to bridge because it makes it so much more difficult for them to control the two areas of the choke if the payload is past the bridge point. Um, obviously, play this. Obviously, if our tanks get pushed out, we can drop and heal up. Our mercy should be close enough to heal them while not being at risk. Sonic arrows should be constantly being put down bottom right unless we know where they all are. But still, it's important to actually keep sonicking that because the support might be trying to hide there, or someone might be looking for, like, I don't know, McCree might be hiding down there. There are so many things that can happen. Sorry. So making sure that we control those three chokes are the most important parts of Gibraltar, because if you get stopped here, it is very difficult to retake if the team knows how to control these two chokes and control hangar, which again is what I've been through already. So that's how I would try and snowball second, is controlling the chokes, get your snipers in advantageous positions, and making sure that we use all of our tools to control chokes as much as possible. Now third, this is very difficult because I think the third is very difficult to take, uh, unless maybe you change the whole comp dynamic. So I think Sombra could work really well. I think Tracer would work really well. I also think that like Hanzo would work really well, or Widowmaker, depending on what comp they have again. Adaptation. So I'd keep the two dive tanks. I would go with a flanker at this point, with a Widow, then this. So I would keep those five. And now this is where you can be like inventive. You could use Sombra. Now the reason why you could use Sombra is because remember what I said before about the monkey. Monkey will be controlling this area, right? So if you get a Sombra that goes behind and hacks the Mega for start off with, or she could just completely ignore the Mega and say, hello, monkey's up top, I can hack him, I can hack him. Okay, get ready, hacking him now. If he gets hacked up there, he should die 100%. Monkey can dive up there, D.Va can dive up there, push him away. Now you control this area. It's important that you don't die now. And it's important for your backline that they are far enough away that they cannot be contested. Either they could rotate into Mega here and still push the payload. Like they could still contest the payload like here. What? Because they're in no immediate danger here. The only danger that they are is that their Winston overextend. Oh, the Winston should be dead by this point, so the Winston's irrelevant. Is the only way they're in threat is if they have double flanker and they get in the back line, but then we're in a position where we can actually peel for them while still maintaining the high ground because they have nothing to contest it back, apart from D.Va. But if D.Va does that, same thing will happen. You hack them and go again. So what's Sombra's job now? So Sombra's job now is should be going and scouting again. Oh look, this person's on the high ground. Can we go? Yeah, I'm hacking this person. Go up. I make it sound so easy, but sometimes it is that easy to just punish people's positioning. If you understand how the map is played, you understand how to beat it, you understand what the setups would be, and you'd get a rough idea about how people would play against it. Obviously, they might run like Reinhardt and stuff like that, but the same principle. You could play slow, you could play around picks, you can play around information, you could play hard dive, you could play mirror, you could run goats if they're running Reinhardt, to be honest, because they don't want to control these two high grounds. Or what you could do is run double projectile and control the two areas that they cannot control with goats. If they're running Ryan, they are basically forfeiting those two high grounds, unless they're running Widow, which then you should just run your own Widow and run Sombra as well, because if you get rid of their or Hanzo, sorry, you get rid of their Widowmaker with the Sombra, and your Hanzo is free on those two high grounds against goats, it's free. Or you could run Pharah and play the same principle. It's all about understanding how to adapt, how to play around the composition, and how to use their composition to your own advantages rather than playing to their strength. If they're running goats, you want to stay on the high ground as much as possible. If they're running Winston dive, you want to control those two areas. You want to use a Sombra or a flanker of some sort to push them off of it. Because Tracer can do the same job as Sombra, except she can't obviously hack them. So she could go around the high ground, pepper this Winston, and make him jump away. As soon as he jumps away, maintain it. You don't need to stick your tanks up there now. You can just keep Tracer up there to maintain control. And then once you go for a dive on the Pacific spot, she can jump across with their blinks and help engage. So that's my basic rundown of Gibraltar. It wasn't in grave detail or advanced detail, but I hope it helps. Eventually, once I do everything through basic, I might do like a through advanced, like every single scenario that you could do, every single comp you could do, and every single set play you could do. But for now, I'm going to stick with the basics and work my way up. Thank you guys for watching. Hope this helps.